Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is life coach and LOA teacher Joel Elston.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
So first things first, the title that you're seeing, if you're watching one of the videos in the various places that we live stream this, isn't going to be quite accurate because what we're really talking about is epigenetics, but that was what Jen was trying to allude to when she wrote the titles up. So don't worry too much about what the title is. This is about epigenetics. And It ties back to what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, last time we did a show together, in which, among other things, we said, we should be really spending more time on epigenetics. So that's what we're going to do today.
Well, we talked about this many years ago, and was the author of the book, The Biology of Belief. He's Dr. Bruce Lipton. So Dr. Lipton was one of the people on the Human Genome Project many years ago, and he was a traditional scientist believing genetics and the standard fare as they were deciphering these things. And there were many shocking discoveries when they sort of decoded the human genome.
Right.
So we mentioned this last time we talked. They were, because there's this fruit fly that had, I think, 26 genes, and it was like, wow. So a minor fruit fly has 26 genes. So we're going to extrapolate from that. Humans are obviously going to have far greater. So it's going to take multiple years to decode this. Well, they were done in about 30 days because we had less. we had less. We had 23. So they were baffled by that because that started him sort of on a discovery of exactly how can we get away with 23 genes, whatever that concept would be. And so it went into a deep dive. And so it's very technical, but the assumption that our genetics are the leading cause of how we believe, or not necessarily how we believe, but how our health is, how tall we're going to be, color of our hair, the color of our eyes, behaviors, for a lot of people, they believe that, the chance of getting certain diseases. Mm-hmm. So epigenetics was not even in the picture back then. So genetics was there, and a lot of people believe that genetics they're just what they are. You can't overcome genetics.
Right.
Now,
you're locked in. Whatever your genetic deal was, that was it for life.
Yes. So your eye color, for example, is genetics. I am unaware of any way to change that. I do know people that eye color do change every year, but
but not from the genetics.
Not from the genetics. So that could be explained. Kids are born with blonde hair. It often gets dark hair. So there are changes, but a lot of these things are built in. Your height generally can be influenced by diet and exercise, but to a small degree. It's generally said you're really tall. That was in your genetic code. So somehow you got there.
I never quite figured that one out because I'm far and away taller than anyone else in my family. I mean, my father was taller than average. He was 6'2". My mom was about 5'10", but that you can't get 6'8" out of that.
Well, you can, in the sense that, your mom's is probably more from your mom's side. That's very tall for a woman, 5'10". Mm-hmm. And so that concept is that basically you won the gene. It depends if you consider that a victory. You won the gene victory in that. Both of their tall genes sort of contributed to a greater sum with that.
Yeah.
But where epigenetics plays a role, epigenetics literally means above genetics. So something that's above genetics. That's the definition of what epigenetics is supposed to say. So epigenetics starts looking at how does your environment, how does your diet, how does your perspective, how do things, what could affect your genetics? And then it became really fascinating because traditional science started saying, no, don't do that. That's crazy. And that's when Dr. Bruce Lipton decided we got to do more of this. And he sort of broke from traditional, work and as a scientist and started looking into more of this epigenetics, an amazing discovery. So let's say, for example, a female has the gene for breast cancer. Many females do have that gene.
Mm-hmm.
Not every female gets breast cancer.
Yeah, how about that?
Yeah. So we haven't been able to figure out exactly why until epigenetics came along. And a lot of people, I know some super smart kids that didn't know they were super smart kids, but their environment sort of supported that idea that they were not very smart. They, whatever was, and they sort of lived up to that potential until they were exposed to the concept that maybe they were smarter and their IQ went drastically up.
Right.
Not, in theory, that shouldn't happen, but it does, because their perspective of what they can understand. I know for me, sort of an epigenetic event for me was, I have ADHD. I did really bad in high school, and I hated high school. I was able to get by. I had a good personality. The teachers loved me, so I was able to get by. But the being able to learn, I knew I was smart, and being able to learn the way they were teaching, it just didn't ever make any sense.
Yeah.
So,
and by the way, I did well in school, and to be honest, it didn't make a lot of sense to me either. I mean, that was the structure,
Right, that was the structure. So you did that. Well, as time went on, and my prefrontal cortex sort of developed fully, and a lot of things happened, I became understood the topics that I was fascinated. Not only did I excel at them, I just went. I loved it. So I went from the narrative, I hate school, I can't learn, to, well, I certainly can learn the stuff I love. I can do that 100%. And I went on to get a doctorate in metaphysics and just crazy stuff, because I just love it. I have multiple degrees in that, unlimited certifications, it seems like, because I love to learn. Yeah, but if you ask me to sit down and read a book on some 1910 novel written by some author somewhere in England, I couldn't make it through the first paragraph, because I have no interest in that. So my discovery realized.
And by the way, I just want you to know you're not alone, because, like I said, I did well in school, and that would usually put me to sleep. So
stuff like that. But stuff I'm interested in, I am all in on that. So, but in my situation, the epigenetic, the above genetics, I overrode that programming, and I test. My IQ was always high. It didn't make my IQ go higher, but my perception of learning, and I'm an excellent learner on topics that I am into. I do incredibly deep dives on stuff that I'm into. So that's one example. There's people that believe they have, they're sickly, and they have all these conditions until they really start perspective. That's and the fascinating thing that makes epigenetics so intense for me is the connection to epigenetics and the law of attraction. There's a direct connection in my mind. This is my thing. So, we believe in the law of attraction. Your reality is created by your perspective. So if people that tend to be sickly, Jerry Hicks of Abraham Hicks, just when he was younger, he was a very sickly child. He wasn't able to do much. He just sort of fell into, I am sickly. He grew up very poor, very sickly. And then he said he decided he wasn't anymore. He started working out, his perspective changed. And before he passed away, I mean, Jerry was a very powerful man, very great speaker, great health, until his medical condition at a much older age took his life. He was thriving health-wise. So it was in a sense, he overrode the genetic system that was already there, because the rest of, there's family members that, like some family members can live to die young, for example, like 50 and 60. And then there'll be that one random family member that lives to be 98 or something and really active. Right. So there's not looking at genetics as being fixed. And why it matters is that the internal dialogue we have, the belief we have about ourselves, is affected by epigenetics. And when you understand that, that's when I say you can pretty much do anything you want to do. That belief system switches genes on or switches them off, depending on what you need to do to adapt to that. So this whole concept is still highly debated, by the way. So there's a lot of people that don't necessarily like this concept, because it departs from traditional science.
Yeah, by traditional science, we don't mean necessarily good science. We mean science that has been etched in stone and must never be challenged or doubted in any way, which is actually a very anti-scientific attitude, but it's common.
Exactly. It's sort of like evolution. The idea that it is generally accepted that we evolved through certain points. And evolution exists. We see that in a lot of other creatures. But so we just have made the great leap that evolution is absolutely the way humans got here. It doesn't mean
Oh,
that
yeah.
we're not evolving, but there's some missing pieces in that.
A
And
few, yeah.
yeah. So now I'm not saying that's not totally true, but we can't really say that. We're making an assumption. Now, I do know humans evolve. I do know that. But that might not be the only factor here. That there's a lot of other factors, but yet you're almost not allowed to question that without
Right.
appearing to be stupid.
Yeah, you mentioned a moment ago the idea, and this is considered to be fact, that IQ doesn't change, which even on the surface, I mean, by the surface, I don't mean the public perception of it. On the surface of how an IQ is determined, when you look at that surface, you say to yourself, well, that conclusion is ridiculous, because how is IQ determined? Well, they give you a test. In my case, when I was in third grade, and the test was basically a general knowledge test that tied into the curricula that I've been taught in my first 3 grades of elementary school.
Right.
And how well I did compared to other kids in the class. So that one snapshot of my life said that I'm a high IQ person. Mine's like a 162, 164, something like that. And then they say, well, that remains true for the rest of your life. How do they know? Well, they don't. They don't actually test for that. They don't actually study it. They just say, well, you can just tell people don't change, so it must be true, which is about as anti-scientific as you can come. But that's what they conclude.
Well, you're absolutely right. So there's a lot of that stuff, and epigenetics role in exactly what you're talking about. You get a child that's in a very dysfunctional family, very poor, not a lot of support. They don't really get educated well. They go to a poor school that doesn't teach properly, or doesn't. Most of them don't, but they don't learn. Primary goal is survival. So you go test that kid against some child that grew up in a family that was reading to them when they were 2, and all these other factors. The privileged child, the child that grew up in the healthy environment, will test much higher, only because they were exposed to more information. Then once you go open that door, and the other person, the other child, is exposed to that, then it's like, oh my gosh, are you telling me their IQ didn't change? Of course it changed. It went much higher. I've seen it countless times that kids were in bad situations, were tested, and of a lower IQ. The biggest one I ever saw, this one young man was tested at 73 IQ, which is very low. And I talked to the kid and I go, that's the most ridiculous thing. This is a very smart kid.
Yeah.
And so after I got to tell the kid, so here's what he did. So when he went and took the test, he was this very defiant 12-year-old. He took the test, and he said, Joel, I didn't read the damn test. I just filled in the blanks. I didn't care. So he goes, I'm
It's amazing he got a 73, actually.
Yeah. I said, well, actually, you did pretty good. He said, yeah, I think, he's like, and he was a very smart kid. He goes, just statistically, I think I probably got a little luckier than average. So, but of course, once we got serious, and once he got his life straight and understood the value of those kind of things, he was tested 3 or 4 years later, 138 IQ.
Wow. Yeah, it's a big jump.
Yeah, big jump. Well, I don't think it ever jumped. I just think he just took it serious. So there's many flaws within that system, and epigenetics suggests that gene expression can be turned on or turned off, and a lot can do with environment. You have some people have a propensity to be heavy, and every one of their family's heavy, so they live up to that expectation. And then someone comes along and they change their perspective, they eat a healthy diet, they change their lifestyle, they do things, and all of a sudden that person loses the weight and goes against the narrative that, oh, you can't lose weight. They always could have lost weight. Now, do they have a propensity for? Absolutely. Look at, there's some people born incredibly muscular. That was their genetics.
Yeah.
But, other people aren't very muscular, but they develop an incredible physique by working on the body, by lifting weights, by eating well. Those are the things that can take place, and they're all forms of epigenetics above genetics. And
which is very informative. This is a little bit of a sidetrack, and I won't stay on it very long. But since we were mentioning IQ, which is supposedly about intelligence, and today the big issue is artificial intelligence, AI, I wanted to bring a little piece in that actually derives from the show I did earlier today. There is, in my opinion, I think I'd call it a conceit, a human conceit, where intelligence is concerned. And the conceit shows up anytime that a human, particularly a human scientist, is evaluating a human, an animal, an insect, the idea of perhaps an alien life form. I mean, no matter what it is you're talking about, they're evaluating it based on what they believe intelligence should look like based on their experience as humans.
Yes.
And the conceit that's built into that is just mind-blowing.
Yes.
It even shows up in our spiritual circles, because a lot of people talk about different levels of consciousness. This is what came out of the show earlier today, because I made the point, consciousness is consciousness. Saying that there's different levels of consciousness, to my opinion, is just human conceit. Basically saying, well, I recognize that as conceit, so as intelligence, so therefore that's a high level of intelligence, but I don't recognize this as intelligence, so that must be a low level of intelligence. That's the way I see it anyway.
I agree. One of my favorite quotes, allegedly by Einstein. I always say allegedly because nobody knew what anybody really said.
These days, especially with AI.
Yeah, but one of my favorite quotes is, if you judge a fish is its intelligence by its ability to climb a tree, it will appear to be stupid.
Yeah.
So when you put constraints or your idea of what intelligence is, just what you're saying, it's not going to live up to that. If I look for if I go on a situation and, I'm an avid weightlifter. I lift a lot of weights. I do,
right.
So if I go into a gym and I'm going to go do a 500-pound deadlift, and I look at the brand new guy standing right next to me that's first time ever doing a deadlift.
Yeah, not even a comparison.
Well, no, but he's never done it. So
right.
it's I can't judge. I'm looking at him going, if I'm sitting there looking at him like he's less than me, or I'm no, he hasn't been on. There will be a time, if he's dedicated enough, he'll be able to do that as well.
Right.
And that's how you look at it. When I look at people, I can't judge them because they haven't walked in my shoes. They don't understand my perspective, and I think I love your concept. That's human conceit. We all tend to have it's a bias toward, if you don't see it the way I see it, then you're either stupid or whatever. It's just this entire thing, and it's not remotely accurate. A child born in inner city Detroit and a child that is born in rural Alabama have an entirely different view of the world.
Oh, yeah.
Entirely different view of the world. And both sides can think the other side is crazy because they didn't have the same perspective growing up.
And they probably will too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's the same thing. We can look at other countries and laugh at them because, they're not as advanced as we are. Again, different situations. So, people have that ability. One of the things that I love about epigenetics is it suggests there's hope. There's always hope. There was a scientist that was working on a rare cancer that, very rare cancer. And very few people got it. It was one of his projects he wanted to do. And very few people, a handful of people would get this cancer every year, and it was always fatal. Never really knew why. After 2 years of studying the cancer, he got that exact cancer.
I remember the story, yeah.
Yeah, his attention was on the cancer. There's the medical school reports, Sean Acorn, who does the great podcast, and he talks the happiness podcast. You remember that?
Right, yeah.
One of the favorite lines he used is his brother-in-law was in med school at Harvard.
Yes.
And when he came to Carl, and he said, when they were, he was having every ailment. He had menopause. He had whatever. Because when you do that, you have a collective that you are installing in your brain of how that's supposed to work.
And I love the way Sean told that story, because his brother-in-law calls him up and says, "Sean, I have leprosy."
Yeah, I have leprosy. Yeah. And well, I mean, one of the worst things you can do to yourself is, if you have a headache, Google headaches. Because it isn't that the first response in Google, Dr. Google, as I call it, the first response is it's probably nothing. It's not that. It's like brain tumor, maybe, and it
starts planning the idea.
Yeah. And so what it is, we have you got to be careful. The reason all of epigenetics matters is when you understand the influence of your environment, your thoughts, your diet that it has on the functionality of your body, you got to really be, and this is where it ties into the law of attraction. That negative inner dialogue that you have playing all day is affecting your body's listening to that and responding. If you're sick, you're sick. If you're poor, and that gets reinforced. And epigenetics does play a role in that concept. Again, I'm stretching the two concepts to match, but this is what I really believe.
I think you're right. I agree with you.
Yeah. And so, to me, that's what I became so fascinated with it is when you overcome. I grew up in a very dysfunctional home, a lot of mental illness, a lot of addiction, saw a lot of stuff as a child you shouldn't see. And, I was that kid in fourth grade that, I was going to school, learning with all this chaos at home. And yet somehow along the way, I was able to frame that differently. I was able to change that differently. So that experience to me that I went through, most people would consider that a severe trauma. And there's a line of belief in psychology right now. So that trauma is yours, always there. You can't go away.
Yeah.
Well, I challenge that to believe I have reframed my trauma into, while those events weren't exciting and great, they were necessary components to me being the man that I am today. That overcoming of that led that to everything I went through. I survived the death of my son because of the resilience that I built having to go through everything. So I combine it all together and say, that's my perspective, change that trauma. And I believe that's a direct epigenetic influence in the body.
And by the way, the reason I brought the whole idea of the intelligence into it, in the human perception, the human conceit, I called it, regarding intelligence, is because I believe the same conceit applies to genetics. I think geneticists.
That's a hard one to say.
It is. The geneticists are dominated, or at least they were dominated, maybe not so much now, but they were dominated by people who believed that the genetic structure was the determining factor.
Yes.
And that was a certain level of conceit because that's all they could believe was there, so it had to be true.
Yes.
In other words, their belief was limiting their science.
Yes.
Which is a really amazing thing that scientists do routinely. I mean,
they do it all the time. When you hear the term, well, this breaks the laws of physics.
Yeah.
Nothing breaks the laws of physics. We need to adjust the law of physics when something happens. The laws of physics, but it freaks me out to hear people say, "Oh, that just breaks the law of physics." No, it doesn't. It doesn't. The laws of physics allowed it, so it's in the law. So,
Exactly. Yeah. So I think what epigenetics really is, in my opinion, is a recognition that genetics is a whole lot more than what geneticists are willing to acknowledge.
And why, and you're exactly right about, but why it matters so much. And there will be people watching going, "What the hell? Who cares?" But where it matters is the influence you can have on yourself or your family. There's a term, I hear people all say, I'm a generational curse breaker.
Oh, yeah.
You break generational curses. That's epigenetics in my mind. It's rising above genetics, and you're overcoming your genetics, and you're optimizing. So, a healthy family, I didn't come from a healthy family, but a healthy family is going to come from me mindset.
Right.
By adjusting that. So epigenetics plays, when you realize not everything is fixed, not everything is and that's life. I mean, so many people want to make everything just factually, this is the only way. And it's not. That's why I love epigenetics, because it challenges the most basic belief for so many people for so long that you're, and then if you really want to get into the CRISPR technology of the re-engineering of genes, oh my gosh, that puts a real, monkey wrench into their belief system too.
Sure.
So there's a lot of factors here.
There are a lot of factors. I think the factor that we are trying to address is that we can let go of the idea that your gene structure dictates your life, because it's not true.
Right.
It actually is so untrue that it has gotten to the point where it's almost impossible to demonstrate a case where it is true. Right.
And that's right. There are things, your skin color, your eye, all those things that stuff is set. It's set,
for now anyway, as far as we know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how they may change that one day, but
I wouldn't rule that one out. Yeah.
As we sit today, I have it like here's a hypothesis by one of the doctors I talked with. He said, there's several creatures, sea creatures and lizards, for example, they can lose their tail and grow a new tail. A lot of sea creatures can lose something. Sharks' teeth have unlimited rebuilding, and they have, there's a lot of creatures that can regenerate limbs. Humans haven't yet. This doctor believes one day humans will evolve to do that.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think really Abraham Hicks answered this one time. I don't know if you knew that, but they actually addressed this question. And they said, yes, humans are quite capable of adding on another limb. The only reason they haven't so far is that no one actually wanted it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, really wanted it enough to attract it to happen.
Well, and a great example of epigenetics is Dr. Joe Dispenza, who wrote the book "You Are the Placebo," as well as "Becoming Supernatural" and a few others. He healed his back with thought.
Yeah.
He literally healed his severe back injury, and he goes in great detail. I recommend both books. I think both books cover that event.
Yeah.
But he
worked out that way.
Yeah, and so he worked really hard mentally, and his body repaired against every single doctor he talked to. It just said that wouldn't happen. And you see that. And one of my favorite examples of beliefs involved, and here it'll tie back in genetics here in a second, is Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile that had never been done in the history of the world.
And it was considered impossible.
It was considered impossible. And he did it, and multiple people broke it within 2 weeks of him breaking it.
Yeah.
Just because the belief change. I saw the other day too, totally random stuff. There was a guy that ran a 3-minute and 45-second mile indoors the other day. And just blew the I mean, where is the 3-minute mile on the horizon?
We'll get there eventually, I think.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating thing, because what we're really talking about is how there are perceptions about reality that are fixed.
Yes.
And that has been the history of most of human knowledge and the acquisition of human knowledge. It's about acquiring fixed belief systems and then learning along the way that the fixed belief systems have flaws in them. And the flaws lead to the fixed belief systems not being so fixed anymore, because it turns out everything can change.
Yeah.
Just hang out long enough, you're going to find a new variant of some kind. You're going to find something that's different.
Yes.
It's almost a surprise that people are surprised by that. It's a surprise that they're surprised. And the reason I say that is, especially from the world of genetics, one of the things that is known and has been known for quite some time is that you can have mutations in genetics.
Yes.
Isn't it theoretically impossible if genetics are final determinants? I mean, if they're final determinants, how can there be a mutation?
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't even make sense.
Well, exactly. Yeah, that's been known, forever. So, the whole study of gene mutation is a whole separate study that, still, gene mutation, where did that come from? Where did that switch flip? So, there's multiple ways genes can mutate. You can be exposed to the different environments too that make things happen. But the idea that the most fascinating part of all this, and in a year from now or 5 years from now, we can talk, and there's going to be so much more information because the way we're studying it. And in fact, when I was preparing for tonight's show, just reviewing some stuff, I asked my AI just refresh me on epigenetics, and it went on and on about just upcoming stuff, studies, beliefs, and of course I ask it to hypothesize and it's like eventually, it gets into, said, well, in theory this could go anywhere. This could it's possible we haven't begun to touch this. And imagine now, as AI advances, the assistance of AI as we study this, it could even get better.
There's also something else that occurs to me, and I don't know how far along geneticists are in terms of changing this belief system, but a key piece of the belief system that for many generations was associated with what was known about genetics and what was believed about genetics is that when there is mutation, when there are changes that happen, they happen generationally. In other words, one generation is one way, the next generation is another way.
Yes.
In other words, they believed at that point, and I don't know if they still believe this, I hope they don't, but they believed that the only way that a genetic change happens is when there's a new reproduction of the life, which defies logic. Why is it only then that a gene expression changes? It doesn't make any sense. And yet that was believed for a long time. Well, the reason I mention that is if we can throw that idea out the window, which it clearly deserves to be done, it doesn't deserve to hang around, then it's no longer a stretch to say we can change our genetic structure within our lifetime.
Exactly.
And probably within a very short period of time. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if it's possible to change genetic structure within a matter of minutes. I don't know data to support that. I just wouldn't be surprised if that came along. Once we start thinking about it that way, well, then the whole LOA thing really comes into play because now thoughts really do become things.
Well, and that's what's matching this is the emerging of the woo-woo thoughts become things, you guys are crazy, to here's some science and everybody's like, oops, maybe they were right, and that's always fascinating to me. But just like again, Esther Hicks talks about in one of the books or all the books, is the law of attraction is only delayed because you believe it takes time to work.
Mm-hmm.
It can only do what you believe it does. So things can happen instantly, but there's not a belief system to support that. So it tends to take longer. It's
right.
I must be patient. I must wait. I must do that. Versus that's why, we've often we've had the discussion about younger people, children that are exposed to the law of attraction concepts, and they are instantaneous in adapting to it and are far better at it than any of us are.
Yeah, they snap it right up.
Yeah, they just snap it right up, and because they have no limiting beliefs that limit the law of attraction's production.
Right. Yes. And how cool that is, because that demonstrates just how important the limiting beliefs are, not in getting what we want, but preventing us from getting what we want, preventing us from having any kind of experience of change.
Well, when you have that belief system that there isn't things aren't changeable, then the effort to make them change, you don't try, or you put in minimal effort. Now, as you know, I'm a very action oriented law of attraction guy.
I had noticed. Yeah.
I mentioned that. So I personally, speaking for me, have never met anybody that was sitting on the couch and somebody brought him $1 million.
Yeah, I don't know that story either.
Yeah. So I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but I haven't seen it. I have seen countless people become multimillionaires by changing their perspective and moving forward and doing and taking action to match. And whatever that action is almost doesn't matter. We talked about that. Just going. And the law of attraction is best used with action attached, intentional action attached.
Right. And when you take that action in a way that is consonant with a belief in the change, then you're creating something really powerful there. What stops us is when we believe that it can't change.
We can't change, or there is no other answer. There is, this is it. This is my lot in life. I've always struggled with money, so I will always struggle with money. And money, one. That's a common one. My belief is that most people come in contact or come in discovery of the law of attraction with mainly one of three goals: money, health, or relationships.
Pretty much, yeah.
Those are the three that bring them to the table.
I mean, there are variations that kind of tag onto those, but those are the three.
Those are the main three things. That's how most people discover it. And they're like, okay, so all I got to do is, in Rhonda's book, The Secret, she, all you got to do to attract a partner is clean out some closet space and you're good.
And there was a little truth to that.
No, it gets the mindset. But and I'm not making. I love The Secret, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, sure. You give out hundreds of books of it a year, so I know you love it.
Yeah. That's it's a great introductory thing, and I do agree by cleaning out. But you have to understand, when people read the book, say, I cleaned out my closet, nobody showed up. So okay, it's a little more than clean out the closet. It's the belief that's there, the belief that you can try. It isn't just making room, but it's also are you going? Where are you at? Are you going to sit on the couch eating ice cream, expecting your soulmate to show up and ring the doorbell?
Yeah. Are you going to just clean out the closet, or are you going to clean out the closet and clean out the mental closet? And by the way, come out of the closet and
Yes.
go out and actually do something to
Go
find
out,
something.
go out, have fun.
Yeah.
Go meet like-minded people. I have multiple stories of, one of my favorite. I think I shared this with you. One of my friends is got divorced, and he's a doctor. We share a love of neuroscience, and I've sort of sold him on the law of attraction. He doesn't really like it, but he's probably listening, so he believes it. He just doesn't like to admit he believes it.
Okay.
So,
well, welcome if you are listening. Thank you for coming in.
Yeah. So with him, so one night, he's divorced, and he's very busy practice, got a couple kids. He just he's doing the apps for dating.
Oh,
and
yeah.
He said, "This is the most horrible thing in the entire world." And I said, "Those."
I have trouble disagreeing with him on that one.
Yeah. I said, "Look, I don't know about those apps. I just the metrics used. It's a clever line and a good looking picture, and that's pretty much the problem." I said, "I don't see how that could work, but keep using them. But I think you need to go out, meet people. I need to go into environments." So at the University of Richmond, I live in the Richmond, Virginia area, and the University of Richmond was having a conference on a speaker on neuroscience and neuroplasticity. You knew I'd be there, right? So, yeah. So I said, "Hey, let's go to this thing."
This story. This is great.
Yeah. So we go to this thing. Now, I wasn't trying to do this, but I talked him into going because he was sitting around doing nothing. And he said, "Yeah, that sounds interesting." This guy was from some, I forget what, I think it was Emory University. He was giving a talk about it. Great speaker. And so we go in and we sit down, and, I sit down. There's this, and he sits down. On the other side of him is this lady, has a notepad, and, she seems very nice. She nodded, smiled, and she had the notepad. Of course, he wasn't going to say anything. Of course, I can't shut up. So I introduced us both, and I said, "Are you interested in neuroscience?" And she said, "Actually, I am a doctor, and I'm in the process of doing my residency and all this, and so I'm really busy. But I am fascinated about this topic." And she said, "I am considering psychiatry one day, or certainly neurology." And so we started talking back and forth. And so my friend who was sitting right by her, they started, and so once I sort of got the conversation primed, I faked an exit, said, "Oh, I got an important call I got to go make." So I stepped away and went to the back and finished the thing. And I just looked at them, they just were talking the entire time.
Wow.
And so long story short, they exchanged number, they went out, and they're dating / probably going to get married. I mean,
wow, fantastic.
Really good connection. So, that took place by, to me, the law of attraction, the law of action, getting in the environment with people with the right mindset. Like-minded people are attracted to each other. You weren't going to find that match on eHarmony or Hinge.
No, the odds of finding that on eHarmony are about 1 in 10,000.
Yeah. So, so that's how I look at it. So it's sort of the similar thing with when you look at epigenetics. When I think action toward epigenetics, if you believe, like Joe Dispenza believed, about his back healing and taking action, he literally would, he knew the names of all the chemicals needed to heal his back. He thought about them showing up, and amazing connection. So the action of epigenetics is what changes you want to make, not just your mindset. But if you want to lose weight, let's start losing weight. Let's start eating healthy.
Yeah, I had a guest on. When was he? He and his wife came on, I'd say probably within the last 6 months. I can't remember exactly when it was. And his story was about how he'd had a massive weight loss. He had reached 300 pounds. His correct weight was probably going to be somewhere around 200, 210, something like that. So he was about 100 pounds overweight. And he made a really interesting comment as he was telling me the story about how he lost that 100 pounds. He said, "I knew how to lose the weight. That wasn't the issue." He said, "I believe everybody who needs to lose the weight knows what they have to do to lose the weight. They just aren't willing to do it."
Right.
They just aren't willing to do it. I mean, I listened to that sentence and I want to underline it twice and make it bold and put it all in caps. They just weren't willing to do it.
Well, that's it, man. And a lot of people aren't. A lot of people, what you say you want is very seldom what you're willing to do until you become one of the things with addiction. Everybody believes when they're in the middle of addiction before they, I'll quit at some point. I will
Yeah.
quit at some point. I will stop at some point. Everybody says that.
Which, by the way, is probably your first clue that they have no intention of doing anything along that line.
Yeah, yeah. Well, until there will be an event, likely, hopefully, because the other event would be death, but or prison. But hopefully, there's an event that gets them motivated to do it and take the action. But it's really hard action. It's really hard to do it because you're doing, just like you're saying, just stopping eating is so simple. It's so. You can, there's a million effective diets out there. There's all kinds of effective diets. I don't favor one. I personally
more than others, but they'll all work to some extent.
Yeah, I prefer lower carbs, but it's always calories in and out on top of that. That's always the ultimate thing. So, but regardless of what I'm into, there's ways to lose weight, and you expend more calories than you take in, and you want to take in nutrient dense, calories and stuff like that. But people are like, no, I don't want to give up the ice cream. I don't want to give up this. I don't want to give up that. And that's fine, but you don't want to lose weight enough. And so when until the pain of staying the same exceeds the pain of change, most people stay the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, the good news, it doesn't have to be pain. You're right. For most people, it is pain, but it doesn't have to be. That to me is like the best news possible.
Yeah.
Because that means we don't have to wait until we're in serious pain before we make a change.
Which is true. However, in real life, I'm not just because I never believe in never. The majority of people need the pain.
I don't doubt that.
Yeah.
I don't doubt that.
Yeah.
I just take heart from the fact that it doesn't require pain in order to start making a change.
Yeah. So
you can decide and follow through. You really can do that.
Oh yeah. You can. And I know when I have one of the recommendations to every single client that I have, regardless of age or physical ability, is exercise, period. That's everybody. And so, when I recommend it, and there's people that'll just say, I'm not ready to exercise. It's okay. Well, and then if you keep telling me that you're not ready to exercise, but yet you're still saying your number one goal is to get fit and lose weight.
Yeah, well, that becomes a little problematic. Yeah.
Then we got a problem. Then we have that's how you get stuck into circles and cycles, and you can't get out of them. Versus the idea that I'm going to take action, and we're gonna do this, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but let's get started, and that supports that concept. But a lot of people believe they can't. People believe that they're limited in ways that they're not limited. And this is where the epigenetic concept, if you buy into it, I don't know of anything that really can't be changed. That is when that on some level for sure.
There's a fun side to this whole thing as well. And I'm tying it into the part that I was talking about, where I was talking about the fact that you don't have to be in pain in order to make change. I totally get it. Most people don't make change until they're in pain. But just following up on that thin strip of those of us who have actually tried making changes without being in pain, there's a fun corollary that goes along with it. It takes a while to kind of kick in, especially if you have a lifetime like I did of not believing that you could change anything. But once I started to do it, I found that it's kind of addictive. Now, that doesn't mean that I want to change everything in my life within the next 2 weeks, because I still have plenty of ways that I resist. But even with the little tiny incremental changes that I make a bunch of them, and I notice a little bit of improvement, and I just want to keep going. I don't want to do them all. Doing all that's too much. I can't handle that one. But I can do some of them. I can do a little bit. I can do a little bit more and a little bit more. And that incremental approach, it has an addictive quality to it.
It does. And I'm a big fan of change. I make drastic changes sometimes, and I love it. I like that. Sometimes I'll just make a change that makes no sense just for the sake of change. And I'm always amazed at how that puts me in the right position for that next thing. So,
all right.
At the end of last year, 7 months ago, I decided I was going to sell my house.
Right.
And randomly, I decided I was going to sell my house. So I found a townhome where I'm living right now, decided to lease it for a year. And then I put my house on the market. It sold instantly. And that began a process for me. It was exciting. I love it. I love the place I'm living at right now. It's not where I want to be forever, but it's a different environment. A lot of things changed, and my perspective changed. Now I know, hey, I have a couple of options on the table right now. I posted on Facebook a house I may buy at Smith Mountain Lake.
Really I saw that home. One. That was beautiful, by the way.
Beautiful home right there. Or I might go to Portugal and move and live. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have
one. Those are two amazing options, by the way.
They are, and I have no idea. And there might be a third or fourth option. I have no idea. But what I love is change, and so putting yourself in a position. So I need incremental things to happen. So the drastic move of selling my home and moving. There's people saying it makes no sense you're doing that. I go, why? I mean, of course it does. To me, it did, and where I love what it did for me, it gave me a new perspective now. Now we can look at from here, I can go anywhere. I could have gone anywhere from there before, but I believe in that. Just you change it, disrupt it, and options appear.
And by the way, the naysayers that you were just referring to, I used to get frustrated by them. I have a different perspective on them now. I love them. Oh, yeah. And the reason I love them is I now understand if I encounter a naysayer, I know 100% for a fact that this is somebody who is locked into a belief system that they're not willing to change.
Yes.
So I already have, it becomes very easy to read them. It becomes very easy to understand them and to interact with them because, okay, they're exactly what I see. I may not like what I see, but they're exactly what I see. So I know how to interact with them. That makes it so easy.
It does. And I had I have people that when I talk to people, like you're saying, oh, you can't, how many times people told me I can't do anything?
Well, that's probably where you got all the money for the house in Smith Mountain Lake.
Yeah, a lot of times. Yeah, exactly. So, but the idea, for example, for me was, you wouldn't be able to, I created a mess in my life. Addiction, became a convicted felon, lost my job, all that. So people, there's no way you come back from that. There's not a comeback. It's, I kept, maybe you can do manual labor and be okay, and nothing wrong with manual labor, but you get my point. It was, people thought I did. I believed it for a while that I really limited myself.
Sure. You thought your life pretty much was done.
Yeah. And, anything I would do required a license. The only two things I'd done before that was manage group homes for children and insurance business with my dad. And both required licensures and background checks that a convicted felon can't get.
And besides, one of them is actually what led you to become a convicted felon.
Exactly. So there are many, many parts there. There wasn't a lot of hope. So the chain of events, and we don't have enough time for me to go through that whole chain of events, but it seems impossible. I say that all the time. What happened after that is not plausible unless you lived it. To go and not only did, I overcome, all that financially and all that and get to a great place financially. The single male convicted felon adopting children is not really a high number.
No, I would imagine it's less than 1%.
Yeah. And I did it 3 times. So it was something that, again, I was able to overcome that. A successful business, just the connections I've made. I turned a felony conviction into a credential.
Yeah.
Which,
by the way, that's one of my favorite credentials I've ever encountered. I've never been a big fan of credentials. I don't collect credentials. I don't think I even have one. I probably do somewhere, but I don't have any. But I love that credential. I think that's amazing.
Well, it's the one that connects me with so many people. It's the one that, the flawed nature. When you go see a traditional therapist, you're going to be like, well, they read it out of the book and they always present themselves. By the way, this is a false presentation because I know a lot of therapists and they're not. That's a whole different topic. But the idea that I go in and I share my story. So when somebody says, so this dude ended up homeless, got a felony conviction, and is doing this now, I can pretty much do this. That's where people, there's credibility in that. You can go read about it all day in a book, but when somebody actually took action to change things, now you have an authority because you did something from that seemed impossible.
And by the way, that's also how I ended up continuing this show. Because you'll remember, we did the first 200 episodes together, and then I brought other co-hosts in and so forth. But by that point, we'd pretty much covered law of attraction. It's
Yeah.
not like there was a lot we had to cover that hadn't been covered yet. But I wanted to keep going. I think you did too. I mean, we were having so much fun doing this. So I kind of switched it around in my head to, well, let's just get a whole bunch of different perspectives. And as I started getting more perspectives by bringing on new co-hosts and then later on bringing on guests, what I discovered was, wow, this is really amazing because I'm being exposed to all these different ideas I never thought I'd be exposed to, and thinking about things in ways I hadn't really thought about before, and really appreciating how many people have a similar kind of story to yours, where they went through a crash and burn. They went through some horrible event. Maybe it happened in childhood. Maybe it happened as a young adult. Maybe it happened when they were later on, mid-adult years. But somewhere along the way, they had something really horrible happen. They came out the other side and they said, well, they never want to go through it again. It was the best thing that ever happened to them. And every single one of those stories was a fascinating credential.
Yes.
And I started like, holy crap. Now I know what kind of credentials I'm looking for. I'm looking for the people who've lived real life.
Yes. Yes. And that's and when you see to me, what the point of what I went through was, I have two beliefs in that. Number one, it strengthened me. Everything I went through strengthened me to be the person that I am today. It changed everything. The people that you see, the person you know me now is not the person that I was 30 years ago.
Yeah, sure. You went through a lot of change.
Yeah, a lot of changes. This resilience, this mindset, all this is something that I was a result of the struggle. And but the other part I think that really helps the most is I openly share my struggle. I post on Facebook all the time about the stuff I went through. I don't know anybody thinking about bragging, because but I share openly about eating out of a trash can and all the other stuff. Not because I want to harbor that in my brain. That I want people to think, if this guy can do this and end up where he's at, there's nothing I can't do.
Exactly. And that is what the message is. And I think that is the message that we take away. We may not think about it consciously. I mean, there are probably a lot of people who've heard your story that can actually think to themselves consciously, well, that proves that if he can do it, I can do it. But I guarantee that on a subconscious level, that's what they were thinking. Yeah.
And that's sort of the delivery. And how much I care about what people think. That's a big thing.
There's that one too. Yes.
Yeah. That's another thing that comes with all of this, is you learn to not care what people think. And that's a very positive to do.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. But it is a fascinating part as we look at it, back to it's sort of circling back to the epigenetic side of this. Those events changed me. I never had a DNA test, or I don't know the way to ever compare, but the expression of my DNA has changed gigantically because of my experience. And that is epigenetics.
Yes.
That is epigenetics. And the way my brain functions, I was born into anxiety and depression. I don't have any anxiety, any depression. That doesn't exist in my orbit anymore at all.
Well, except when you talk to somebody who has it, but that's about the extent of it.
Yes. On a personal level, I don't experience that.
Level, right.
I literally deal with it every single day. But as far as my experience with it personally, that's a done deal. I don't have it. There's nothing that can happen that I'm not like, yeah, okay, I got it covered.
I think one of the most fascinating things about you that I really like is, not only do you have that story, not only have you been able to turn your life into this amazing life story where you're helping other people who went through similar kinds of things to what you went through, but how you're able to continue to help them without the traditional support structures that are normally applied to people in the mental health field. They normally say you want to have somebody that is your therapist so that you can be working with them to let go of the stuff you pick up from doing your sessions with your clients and so forth. You don't need to do that. Your mental outlook has basically prevented you from having to do that. I find that to be absolutely impressive.
And I appreciate that. It's part of the foundation of why I've sort of discovered this. It's like my goal when I walk into a room or somebody walks into my office is to elevate people to my energy. That's my goal. And when you've been in a room with me for a session, if I did it right, you're going to feel out a lot better when you leave. And that's sort of that's a demonstration that, like I had a guy the other day depressed and anxious and no hope. And by the time the session was over, I said, so I asked him depression scale on 1 to 10, how depressed are you?
Yeah.
He said about a 9. I said, that's pretty bad. Anxiety, about an 8. So when we're done with the session, I said, give me that same scale again. And he goes, 1 for both.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, I said, but just be aware. Now, I'm not saying that's gone. It's going to come back. It's going to come back. But just being exposed to an elevated energy. So what do you want to do? You want to surround yourself with elevated energy. It's not somebody around there. There's plenty of good podcasts like this one. We can complain about all the stuff with the internet and all that right now, but we have access to so much information, so much positivity. And you could go to ChatGPT, or I use Google's thing too, but I have all the AIs, and you can have a therapy session with them. They're incredible. They're far better than a lot of therapists I know.
Yes, which is kind of sad, really.
Yeah, I mean, it is sad. It's like, the idea that it's really on, and so there's countless opportunities for us to learn, to grow, to be inspired, and that's what I love about it, and that's the energy that raises, because the perspective of the days we live in. I know so many people say this is the most desperate time in our history.
Oh yeah.
I'm on a different page. And not because of any politics or any side. That's not why. Because regardless of which side is doing the crazy stuff they're doing, regardless, I'm going to be okay, because I'm in charge of my perspective. My reality is created by that. It's that simple.
I want to throw in one caveat, which is, and I'm pretty sure you were implying it, which is that I wouldn't recommend using AI to do deep therapy on, say, being sexually abused as a child or something like that.
Nope.
Where I would use AI for help is not so much as a therapist, but as a coach. Ask the AI to coach you into a better place.
I really appreciate you saying that. We can't stress enough. If you have severe trauma, severe stuff, you must seek. I hope you will seek professional help,
and hopefully a good one.
A good one, and don't. Right now, the way the system works, I would interview several therapists. I would love for everybody to really understand they need that. What I'm talking about is that day-to-day motivational stuff. You get up, just I have conversations with my AI every morning about just stuff, and it's all positive mindset stuff. How this brain never stops. I'll think about something in the middle of the night. I'll wake up in the morning and run it through AI. It's just it can give good feedback. It gives good suggestions. And even if you ask AI, if you said I'm depressed and you give me some help, it will tell you it will not give it to you until it informs you that they're not a therapist and you need to do that. But here's some ideas.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to get the most vibrational benefit out of it, because that's what we're talking about is vibration, then I like to keep this basic idea in mind. Your AI is going to be a mirror to you.
Yes.
So if you are deeply depressed, the AI is going to, in some way, to some degree, mirror back your Great Depression. If you are elated, then it's going to mirror back to you your elation, which is really no different from what human beings do, by the way.
Well, that's it. And so the idea that being able to get from that's why the input to the AI is going to be sort of a mirror back.
That's right.
And that's really that makes a lot of sense. And so AI can be helpful, but if you have a serious problem and you really are going through some stuff, traditional therapy is very effective. Some people do need medication. There's a lot of options, but you don't want to rely on a upstart AI concept. It could be an adjunct to it, more of a coaching concept, ways to spring ideas and get motivated, but it's never going to replace the real help you need.
And what you can do in order to get the most out of the AI, you mentioned the prompt, which is the thing that you enter into the little chat box field that you type stuff into or that you speak into, depending on how they're set up, is to give the AI as much information, not only about what's going on with you, even if it's negative, but also what you want to get to. Yes. So let's say you're depressed and you don't really know any other way to say it than, well, I want to no longer be depressed. Make that the the main part of your prompt that you're giving to the AI. Don't just say one sentence, I want to feel better. Give it all of the reasons why you want to feel better, what you would do with it, how you would feel, how it would make you feel, what you'd be able to accomplish if you felt, all those kinds of things. Plug all that in, and that will feed back to you the kind of AI you're looking for that's going to give you the coaching you're looking for.
But, and when I describe anything to AI, when I start, and it remembers, but I'll remind it occasionally, is I'll start with, I'm a life coach. I'm a big believer and practitioner of the law of attraction. I believe, I give them a bio of me to sort of get an idea of what my mindset is.
Yeah.
And so everything, and like I always say, in my world, the law of attraction is not pseudoscience; it's pure science. I'll just throw that out. So it then responds. So the other day I was this is one of my weird things. So I was comparing olive oils, of course.
Okay.
For the highest levels of the healthy ingredients that are in olive oil.
Okay.
And so I was looking for that. And so there's a brand by a guy he's this biohacker that's famous that makes Blueprint is called. He makes a really high quality olive oil.
Okay.
And so I told AI, I would like to find comparable olive oils to this. And so I kept noticing in the description, it found one that I really loved that was available at Publix, but in its description, it had a bias toward the original one I said, the Blueprint.
Oh, yeah.
And so I said, well, it seems you have a bias toward Blueprint. Why? And he goes, I don't have a bias toward anything. I don't have that in me. However, when you give me the baseline, I'm doing that as a comparison. So if you'd have done the other one first and then compared it against Blueprint, I would have had would appear to have a bias toward that. So there's it's nuanced as I learn how to use that.
Exactly. And I'm glad you described that. That's a great way to explain how to get the most out of AI, is to recognize that's the way the AI tends to think about things.
Yes.
It tends to think about comparators exactly the way you just described.
So it wants to say, okay, well, so obviously everything's going to be measured against this Blueprint olive oil. And then the other olive oil you get at Publix is cheaper and higher levels. I'm like, why aren't you jumping up and down about that instead of talking about the other one? It's like, now I get it.
Exactly. Well, it's a little bit of a stretch from the original epigenetics topic, but it's actually not all that different, because we posited the idea that epigenetics is above genetics. I think that's the way you defined it.
Yes.
And above genetics is a mental sphere. It's a mental and emotional sphere. You might even say a spiritual sphere. But that sphere, or that realm, or whatever you want to call it, is where any kind of possibility exists. So what are the possibilities? Well, in this case, the possibility is you can find an olive oil that's a better olive oil, but it's also, you can find how AI works, but it's also, you can find how, what's going to be the best thing for me. I mean, it becomes an endless spiral of positive things that come out of that one start. Completely. That one basic concept, that basic epigenetic concept, that I don't have to be tied to my genetic structure.
And that
start breaking through, and oh my goodness, all kinds of things happen.
Well, and that's the exciting piece to me. Instead of the idea that we epigenetics is a very complicated topic. We try to keep it as conversational as possible, but it gets much deeper than what we're saying. But the bottom line is exactly that. You can influence your genetics, your genes, to do things differently than they were programmed, respond differently. And so anything you can believe, either direction, you can develop. You can make yourself sick by believing you're sick. You can make yourself well by believing you're well. And that's not every case. I'm not saying it cures cancer. I'm not saying all that. I'm just saying it does have an influence.
Oh yeah, it has a very strong influence. And probably the best thing is to acknowledge that influence so that you can let go of the idea, well, it can't be that. The moment, in fact, that's a good indicator right there. The moment you say it can't be that, you've just identified something it could be.
Absolutely. There isn't any can't be that. As always, it could be.
Yeah, that's precisely right. So good. Well, we'll probably revisit this topic at some point, but I'm glad we did a show on it. We hadn't done it in a while. So thank you very much for that. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.